Hey everybody, it's Lon.TV, and one of my favorite devices of all time is the Mister, and you've probably seen many of my videos about it here on the channel. If you haven't, they're all linked down in the video description. And what it is in a nutshell is a device that can very accurately replicate retro computers, retro game consoles, and retro arcade games. And it replicates those games very accurately because it is powered by a field programmable gate array processor, or FPGA. And inside of that FPGA, they accurately remap the logic of those original devices to the point where things just kind of run the way they did on the original hardware. And some of the work that the community does to make that replication possible is pretty crazy. They actually burn off the casings of chips and map all of the circuits manually and then program them into the FPGA. It's all pretty amazing, and there's a lot of great content about how all that works. The problem with the Mister is that it was often difficult to get into it because you had to buy this Jurassic FPGA development board, get other boards to stack on top of it, get separate memory, and although you could buy a complete set, it was often very expensive to get all the pieces put together and a lot of work to get it all up and running. But recently, a YouTuber by the name of Taki Udon came up with a clone board that makes this a whole lot easier and a whole lot more affordable. And because you can never have enough Misters in your life, I did go out and buy Taki's product here called the Mister Pi. In fact, he sells these things completely assembled and ready to go. And I thought what I would do in this video is just show you how it works and talk about its compatibility. To be honest with you, there's really not much to talk about. This functions identically to the Mister I've been using now for quite some time. And I thought in this video, we'll just take a look at the hardware, run a couple of things on it so you can see it working, and I'll also talk about some of the things that I plan to do with this Mister and what I'm going to do with the other one. So that is what we're going to talk about today. Now, I do want to let you know, in the interest of full disclosure, that I paid for this with my own funds. All the opinions you're about to hear are my own. No one has paid for this review, nor has anyone reviewed or approved what you're about to see before it was uploaded. So let's get into it now and see what the Mister Pi is all about. Now, you can find the Mister Pi at retroremake.co. These are manufactured in batches, and at the time I'm recording this video, everything is sold out, but it took them a while to get through the last batch, so I think when the next batch is available, you should have a good shot at getting one of these if you want one. Now, what I purchased was the Turbo Pack here for $180, and this is a turnkey solution. It has all the components built in and already assembled, so you don't have to put anything together here. All of this stuff that you see here will be stacked into the case, and all you got to do is plug it in. There are some configuration changes that I recommend that I'll show you as we work our way through the video here, but you pretty much get everything you need to get going. What it doesn't include is a USB-C power supply, but you likely have one of those laying around. I do recommend also picking up the Wi-Fi and Bluetooth adapter, just because it makes it a little bit easier to keep the device updated or attach wireless controllers if you intend to plug this into a television and you want to sit across the room. But the case is included. It's pretty much all set to go. And the Turbo Pack also comes with a pre-formatted 64 gigabyte SanDisk SD card that has all the Mister firmware already installed on it. So you just plug it in and you are off and running. You don't have to prep a card first to get operating. But if you wanted to save a little bit of money and you have an SD card laying around, you can get the Mega Pack, which is pretty much the same thing without the case and the SD card. You get all the cards already stacked up and ready to go. Just note, though, that there are some slight port differences on the Mister Pi stack versus a traditional Mister stack. So a lot of the third-party cases out there may not be compatible with the Mega Pack. I think for a lot of folks who are just starting out, $180 to get the whole thing ready to go, I think, is the best way to go. Now, you can also buy the components separately, so you can get the clone FPGA board here for $95. You can then, of course, get the analog board and the RAM and everything else and piece it together. But again, I think getting the full Monty here ready to plug into your display is the best way to go if you are new to the Mister. So let's take a look at the port configuration on here. It is very similar to the regular Mister that I have upstairs. You have your Ethernet here. Now, this is not something that you're going to be playing games on the internet with, at least at the moment, but there are very frequent community updates to the Mister project. So if you plug it into your network, you can run the update scripts and get all of the latest cores, which are what runs all the software, brought down to your Mister on a regular basis, or of course plug in that USB dongle I mentioned earlier. You're also going to notice that we've got a bunch of USB ports on here. Now these two here are not for connecting peripherals. I think these are serial connections. So what you want to plug your devices into is the USB hub that is at the bottom of the stack. So you can see we've got a USB port here, we've got 3 more on this side, and then we've got another 3 here for a total of 7 data ports. And then this one on the front has 2 USB power ports, and this is a feature that I don't think is on the regular Mister device. Also different from the regular Mister is that this is powered by USB Type-C, so it's a lot more convenient to power this. You just need one power connection. It does not, though, have a power switch, very similar to the other Misters, so you may want to get something that can switch the power on and off. And then, of course, you have your HDMI output here. Now, the analog board, which is at the top, allows you to output video to traditional CRT displays. And I did test that a little bit earlier. I plugged it into my component CRT upstairs in my gaming room, and my light gun games worked just fine with it. So that was pretty good. And then I was also outputting analog audio, just with a standard 3.5mm connector out to RCA, which I plugged into this port. Like the Mister analog board, this analog board also supports fiber out with the SPDIF standard. So you can plug in a fiber cable to this or just run analog audio out. Now, as you heard me mention and you saw in that B-roll clip a second ago, we have a port called SNAC, and this is where you plug in a SNAC adapter, which then interfaces with traditional retro devices like a NES Zapper gun. And for cores that support the SNAC, you can play your light gun games on a CRT. It doesn't work on an HDMI television, but if you are plugging this into a traditional tube TV, the SNAC is how you can use your original controllers with it, or of course you can use the USB connections here on the side, and of course your SD card goes in there. Now, one thing that I use with my Mister is an external hard drive. I'll show you how that works with this in a minute, but if you have a big SD card in here, you could likely fit most of your software on there. But if you are playing a lot of retro CD consoles, like the Sega CD, which this supports, or even the Sony PlayStation or Saturn, having the hard drive attached might give you a little bit more extra storage. So that is pretty much the hardware here. It is very simple to operate. It looks exactly, to some degree, like a regular old Mister, and it performs the same way too. So why don't we get my HDMI display up here on the desk, and we'll take a look at the Mister Pi in action. All right, our Mister is all booted up now, and it's behaving just like a regular Mister does. Now, if you've never seen a Mister before, let me show you a couple of cool things that it can do. So why don't we start with the arcade cores here, and I'll just go down to maybe something that I used to like to play as a kid here, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. So we'll find that on my list of games, and I'll show you more about how all these things get on here in a second. And if I hit the enter key here, the Mister reconfigures itself and becomes the original arcade machine that you might have found in your local Dairy Queen back in the day. Complete with audio, everything performs great. It is just absolutely amazing how all this stuff works here. And I can just hit the F12 key here and change it into something else. So why don't we go back to the top of the list here and select some console. Why don't we do a Sega Saturn to make it a little bit complicated here. So we'll hit that. And now what will happen here is we'll boot up the Saturn core. You can see the BIOS is already churning up, and we'll stick in Daytona USA. And the system will reboot, and we've just gone from running a traditional arcade game to a Sega Saturn here with a push of a button. And that's one of the things that I love about the Mister, is that there's not a lot of complexity here. You just select the core that you want to run, and the games generally load up pretty quickly. This is a CD-based game, which takes a little bit longer to load, but there you go. It is replicating a Sega Saturn on our HDMI connection here. And upstairs, when I have this plugged into my CRT, I get it looking pretty much exactly the same way a Sega Saturn ran back in the day. In fact, the video output, because it uses component, is even better than the traditional Saturn might be. And I can even go to something a little less complex here. We can go into the NES core and maybe load up, I don't know, a little game of Castlevania. I think that's what this is. This is Castlevania 3. And this supports all of the extra audio hardware that the Famicom in Japan could do, including also being able to load up some of the Japanese floppy disk games too. So you get just the entire history of the 70s, 80s, and a good chunk of the 90s that you can run on this hardware and explore. And one of the things that I've been doing with my Mister, with this one in particular, is I'm going to be doing mostly retro computing on here, because I've been moving my Mister around from the TV over to a different display for computers, and I wanted to have one dedicated just to classic computers. And one of the classic computers I want to spend some time exploring is the Amiga. And I got this great collection that I will put a link to in the video description that boots up to this really nice interface where you can explore a good chunk of the Amiga library, including a lot of the demo scene stuff, a lot of the games that were popular at the time, and you can just select what you want to play around with here and boot it up. So we can find some demos here, for example, from like 1994. I don't know, we'll pick one at random here. Brain State in a Box. I hope it's nothing crazy offensive here. But this is an Amiga now that can just boot up with its 68,000 processor and give us a look into what the demo scene was, in this case 30 years ago, back in 1994. So this is a good overview, I think, of what a Mister can do for you. It's just so quick, it's so accurate, and it gives you an ability to explore things in a very true to the original way, especially when you plug this into a CRT television. And if you are interested in computing, just look at all the different computers it supports here. It just keeps going and going. Really cool stuff. It can do PCs, but it maxes out at around a 486 level of performance. So you're not quite there yet for higher performance, like mid to late 90s PC stuff, but everything from that era back is going to run great on here. Now, there are some things I recommend doing to get the best Mister experience through some configuration changes. And the first thing you need to do to make those changes is to figure out what the IP address of your Mister is. So if you hit F12 and then hit the left arrow key, you'll get your local IP address here. And the Mister actually has a built-in FTP server that makes it very easy to get files in and out of the device without having to shut it down and pull the card and plug it into your computer. And you can use any FTP client to access it. The security isn't great out of the box. The Mister's root username is called root, and the password is the number 1. So you may want to look at changing that if you're going to have this on a network where other people have access to it. But once you FTP in, you can go ahead and make some of the necessary changes that I think are important to get this working. The first thing is installing a different updater script called Update All. Let me show you that now. Now, Update All is a script that lives on this GitHub page. The easiest way to get it is just to go over here to Update All on the file list and then click on this download button to grab the raw file, and that will drop it into your downloads directory. And then what you do is go over to your FTP client. What you need to do is go out to the root of the device, go over to Media, go to FAT, and then go over to Scripts, and drop that updateall.sh into the scripts directory. And then what we do is we transition over to our Mister, and we hit F12, and we go over to the scripts menu here, and then we'll hit yes to continue, and then just select Update All. Now, it comes shipped with Update, which does many of the same things, but Update All is much more robust. So if we execute this now, we're going to be brought out to a command line looking screen here, and you'll get some introductory pieces here. What you want to do is push the up arrow, and that will bring you into some of the configuration options. Now I'm going to show you what my configuration looks like, and this gets you, I think, the best initial startup with all of the official cores. So on the main distribution screen here, I have it just set to use the official cores from Mister Dev, and then I've got distribution enabled here set to yes. I think those are the default settings. Now, JT cores are what Hotego brings to the mix here. He does some amazing work. He has a Patreon, and you can put your Patreon code into the script here to get the cores that are in beta, but he eventually releases all of them publicly once they are fully put together. And another one you want to make sure is enabled here is the coin op collection. So set that to on, and that will get all of your coin-op cores ready to go. I leave other cores pretty much as is. On Tools and Scripts, I did turn the Arcade Organizer on. This will keep all the files organized nicely on your SD card. Right now I've got the rest of this stuff turned off, but there are some fun things like the Super Attract mode that will have the Mister kind of cycle through running a bunch of different cores randomly. And it's a nice way if you are running your Mister 24/7 to be able to do that. There's a few other scripts here that I haven't really played around too much with yet. In extra content, you do want to make sure that your BIOS database is set to on. I have Arcade ROMs database set to on. That downloads all the Arcade ROMs and gets them configured properly for me. I have wallpapers off right now, but you can add some fun things like that. And you also have a few other options like boot ROMs for popular consoles. So for example, that Sega Saturn just configured itself because I had this option enabled. Many of these are disabled by default, so that's why you need to go in here and turn a lot of that stuff on. If you have an Analog Pocket, they have a script for that too, but of course we are running this directly on the Mister. And once you get everything configured here, you click on or enter over Save, and that will write out the changes, and then you can exit and run the script. And what it will do here is go out and just check everything that you've got currently installed. Make sure that there's no updates for it, those things. If there are, it will automatically update them. And so this is a script that you want to run frequently because there's always going to be something changing. A new core might be introduced or an update to an existing one. And so I run mine. Every time I turn my Mister on after a week or two, I usually just run update all and have it go through everything. And once that initial configuration is done, you don't have to go in and set those settings up every time. You just hit update all and sit back and let it take care of things for you there. So all in a very nice script. Again, not installed by default on the Mister Pi, so this is something you'll probably want to get installed when you first get going. And also, Update All will keep the Linux side of this system up to date too. So it updates everything, which is why they call it Update All. One other thing I wanted to show you were some settings that I changed on the Mister.ini file, and that is for, at least for my purposes, getting my CRT television to work with this Mister when I plug it in. Now I'm back in my FTP interface here because we need to edit the Mister.ini file. So what you do is go back out to your main root there and go over to Media and FAT, and then what you want to look for is Mister.ini. And I'll show you what mine looks like right now by clicking the Edit button here on my FTP client. And what I had to do was have VGA mode here set to YPBPR. I set this YPBR option to 1, which basically turns it on. And I also enabled composite sync here, and that got my CRT to accept the input from the analog board. Now to connect your analog board to your television, you need a cable to do that. This one from Mister Add-ons is a good choice here. It's about 15 bucks. It's similar to the one that I use. And in a nutshell, what you do is just plug the cable into the VGA output here, and then you get component out to your television. And then for audio, I have a 3.5 millimeter to RCA that I plug into the audio jack here and just plug it into the ports on the television. So this works great if your analog TV has a component input, and that will be the best looking signal you'll get. But there's a good chance your analog TV doesn't have a component input. So to get that to work, there's another option. And if you buy one of these active encoder boards, you can get a plain old composite video output to your CRT. It won't look as good as the component does, but it does work if you don't have any other option. But this board also has an option for S-Video out, which although not as good as component, it's pretty close to it. So you pick up this device, there's a couple of settings changes that you make to get that to work, and now you've got a good lag-free CRT solution for your television that might be lacking those component inputs. Now I've got my external hard drive attached, and this is the same hard drive I use on my other Mister. And to get the hard drive recognized by the Mister, what you need to do is make sure that that hard drive has a folder called Games on it. And as you can see here, mine, with a bunch of other folders, has a Games folder. And then inside of this, you just have to make sure your subfolders match the name of the core that it's associated with. So for example, my NES games are in a folder called NES, and as long as everything matches up, the Mister will look to the hard drive directory as opposed to the SD card when it's looking for ROMs to load up with a particular core. So there's not much configuration to do. If you pull the hard drive out and reboot, it will default back to the SD card. And the SD card file structure is the same. So I'll jump back here for a second on my FTP client and just show you how that works. So we'll go back to Media, we'll go back to FAT, and then if we jump into the Games folder here, you can see we've got the same file structure. So pretty easy to get this working. It's identical to the Mister running off of a Terasic FPGA board, so all of the documentation that has been built up over time for Mister is going to apply here. The difference, of course, is you've got something that is a lot less expensive than buying the official hardware at this point, and I see really nothing different about how this works versus the other Mister that I've been using for the last couple of years now. So all in, if you're new to Mister and you want to get in, this is a very affordable way to do it. And it's very addictive too, because you'll be going down retro rabbit holes for quite a while with this, especially when you get this hooked up to your television. And I'm finding here is I'm kind of coming full circle on my retro game habit. I did a video on this the other day where I play a bulk of my retro games now on that CRT television, because that's how I remember those games playing. And you get rid of all the lag, and you've got just as close to the original experience as you can get. And in some ways, things are better with the Mister because I've got that component video output. My NES games and my old Sega Genesis games, everything just looks so much better on that CRT because of the component output here. So it's a really fun way to dive in. My only complaint with this is the fan is a bit on the noisy side. It's not as bad as like a gaming laptop is, but it runs at a constant velocity. It's got a good whine to it. So it's a little noisier than I would like. On my other Mister, I have a fanless case from Mister Add-ons. It's a nice big metal case with a heatsink on it that works great and is completely silent. And because there are some port differences with this Mister Pi stack, the Mister Add-ons cases at the moment don't line up properly. So I'm sure at some point he'll make some new ones that do work with this, and you'll have some more case options. But just know that if you buy the full stack here, my controller is falling off the table. If you buy the full stack here, you will have a few port compatibilities that make some of the existing Mister cases not compatible. So just make sure they work with the Mister Pi as you're out shopping. But all in, I am very enthusiastic about this because I think it's a great entry point to get more people into Mister. And if you haven't played with it yet, now's your chance. Look for the next batch when it's available, and you'll get a really fun thing to tinker with that won't cost you all that much money. That'll do it for this one. Until next time, this is Lon.TV. Thanks for watching.